Hi, Clutter Fairy fans. Welcome to the Clutter Fairy Weekly for April 28th, 2020. I'm your co-host, Ed Gumnick, and I'm speaking with Gayle Goddard, professional organizer and owner of the Clutter Fairy in Houston, Texas.
Hi, everybody. Welcome from cloudy Houston today. We are a webcast and a podcast that we do weekly where we talk about organizing tips and tricks and try to offer strategies and answer all of your questions on our various channels. And we appreciate that you offer them up for us so we can talk.
If you're joining us in Zoom for the first time, you can share your comments and questions via the chat, and I'll try to make sure Gayle addresses them before we move on to another topic. We already have a few questions down there that we're going to get to. You can also use the raise hand feature to let me know if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment yourself via audio or video. We're streaming the webcast live on Facebook, so you can also share your questions and suggestions there, and I'll relay them to Gayle. And during the live webcast each Tuesday, you can talk to us directly by calling 669-900-6833. Use meeting ID 993-419-863 to join the meeting. Okay, let's get to our first topic, which was a response to Erica, who joined us last week in Zoom and tried to ask a question, but we had a little technical difficulty.
Yeah, she sort of, she made an attempt and something went wrong with her computer. So she wrote us an email to share what she had intended to say to us at that point. And she proposed several topics to discuss in her narrative as she was writing. And we selected one idea for today. Erica suggested that one problem she has in getting rid of excess stuff in her own home is the idea that her family might need those items down the road. She says that members of her family have struggled with health and financial issues, and she's had to step in sometimes to support the family from time to time. And she doesn't want to waste resources and give away things that she might need to then later rebuy for her family members. So she's keeping them, and she's keeping things for them specifically. And I totally understand not wanting to waste money and buying things that you already had and gave away and then having to rebuy them again. So the issue is truly just a matter of scale and management of those items in the house. There's a balance to find for things saved for the family versus making your house manageable for you. And so this is where you've determined that you have a need, you have a purpose, which is you want to save specific things to potentially use as a supply to give away to your family members if they're in need. And so it's kind of like having your own, you're having a doomsday prep area for your family, kind of. And so you want to create a space to support that desire to save things and supply them. So you have your own supplies in the house for your own living and your own home management, but you're also saving a secondary level of supply that is for these family members that you're talking about. And so creating a space to save them, first of all, finding a place, a shelf, a drawer, a cabinet, a bin, a container, a box, whatever way you want to create a designated finite amount of space to hold the things you want to save for your family. So pick one slot, pick one space, and then supply it with the things that you find around the house that you think, I don't want these things, but my family may need these things. I may have to buy these things for my family later, so I'm going to save them. So go put all those things that that are in your house against your family's need and not against your own need, and put them in that designated space. And then once you've done that, you will realize that you have a whole lot more probably than the space that you made. And so the first question is, do you want to adjust the amount of space you want to surrender? And this is where you have to talk about that balance, right? How much of your living space in your own home area are you willing to surrender to creating a store for your family of things that they might need later? And so you can evaluate the size of the space, and you can also evaluate the things that you're keeping. So maybe once you pull everything from all around the house that you're saving for the family and you put it all in this designated area, maybe you find that you have 1 million of some kind of thing. And so maybe you can keep 10 for your family and let the rest be donated and feel safe about donating them because you've not you've retained a good enough quantity for your family. The important thing here is not for saving it for the family to be a default that allows you to keep everything and keep your space crowded. And you want to save enough so that you feel like you're not wasting your resources and not burning money basically by giving away something that you know you're going to have to buy later. So designating a space that is finite, of course, gives you some parameters to work within. When that space is full, then you've saved enough, and the rest can be donated in some other way. And once you have reached that level, then you need to watch how often stuff goes in and out. So if you're putting a lot of things in and it's staying there for a really long time and it's not going out fast enough, you may want to shrink the family supply pile. You may find that you are anticipating disaster and it's not happening as often or at the same volume that you expected. And so trim what you save against your own experience of that. If you only have to give things to your family twice a year and you always have plenty on the shelf and you've got way more than they are needing or willing to accept, then you probably can shrink the population. You can shrink the footprint in the house of how much you're saving. The goal here is to make sure that you are not keeping a vast stockpile that will never actually leave the house, and in keeping such a big collection, giving away a whole bunch of your own personal living space against this project. And so if you don't want to throw it all out, which you probably don't, then a secondary donation source would be a women's shelter, a men's shelter, someplace where people are receiving clothing and personal care items that they need to survive. And there's always some organization that's providing those services. So, and you're essentially doing that service for your own family. And so you can keep a stockpile that works for your family, and then the excess can go and serve the same purpose at a broader organization. And then it's one trip to drop the stuff off and it gets the excess out of your house, and you still have a stockpile against your family. But I think it's important to pull it all together and realize how much you are saving against that purpose, against that distribution point, which is supplying your family when they need it, and making sure that the supply doesn't far outstrip the need, and shrinking it down to what you will actually end up giving away to your family. I hope that helps. Like I said, she offered many more topics, and so we're going to circle back to some of her other topics another time, but that was the one that we thought we would answer today. And
great.
That's enough for Erica today.
Yes. Well, let's move on to our featured topic. So we're starting a new series of topics today, which is organizing room by room. And next week, we're going to talk about the garage while it's still cool enough in many places in the Northern Hemisphere to tackle your garage. But for today, we're going to talk about the very timely issue of the home office. So many people working from home right now. So this seemed like a good place to start as we examine the whole house room by room.
Right. We have covered this topic before, so we're circling back to some tips that we've made in 2010, but I'm not sure that we recorded them, right, Ed?
Yeah, I don't think we have video of that.
Oh, we don't have video.
So,
okay, cool.
yeah.
Well, awesome. So we have talked about this before, but at the time, of course, it was not a pandemic and people were not all working from home at the same level. So there's a certain amount of urgency now that wasn't in place when we originally covered the topic. But I'm just going to go through a strategy of steps to manage and sort of rebuild your office to a workspace that you really find comfortable and functional. So we're going to go through step by step the things to do, and then you guys can ask questions that you have about the process in terms of your managing your own office. So step number one is you want all the materials that you need, and so that includes some sorting boxes and a trash can and a recycling bin. And you want the sorting boxes marked here's stuff to relocate. Here's the trash. So that's what the trash can is for, right? Here's things to file, and here's office supplies, and here is equipment. So those are 5 containers that you want going as you start this process. Then you want to sort everything into one of those bins. So clearing off the top of the desk, clearing out around the desk on the floor, clear out the bookcases, and inevitably somebody has a chair in their office and there's a bunch of stuff sitting in the chair. You're basically wanting to uncover all the surfaces and empty all the cabinets and shelves and sort them out according to these 5 boxes. Number 1 is the relocate box. So what you're putting in relocate is the things that have ended up in the office but don't really belong there. They're not really office items. Like, here's dishes you brought when you brought food in to eat. Here's newspaper or things from the bathroom. When your sorting is done, carry these things out of the office and go put them back in their right room. I think that the more out of control the office gets, the more blind you get to what's there, and you will end up finding things and you're like, I've been looking for this. Why is it in the office? So it got lost in the office landscape, and relocation box is for you to capture those things and send them back to where they need to go.
Well, and that's particularly a problem if it's a room that is shared with other functions, like it's also your guest bedroom.
Right, and maybe your guests left some things in there that didn't need to stay there, right? And or the kids are coming in there and they have a craft section, or there's no telling. A lot of people share their office space with other functions, and so even if you are just a portion of a room, you can still police your area and find things that need to be relocated, even if they need to be relocated to another side of the room and not in your office space. Trash boxes for the obvious things. When your sorting is done, make sure you take it out to the trash can. So filing is a box that is to capture paper. And so we didn't want to cover all of the ways to manage paper in this particular discussion, and we have covered it in many videos besides that. So filing your paper is a way to gather all the paper you have in the office and collect it, and just at this point, do a keep, toss, sort as you go through it, as you find things. So you're going to find paper that's trash and paper that you're ready to recycle, and pull that stuff out, and then decide if it's really something that I want to keep. This needs to go into whatever filing system, or I don't need to keep this. And that way you can thin out what is going to be just gotten rid of, and then you can just have one box of the papers that you're trying to keep, and then they're all in one place, and it's not part of the office redress to go through and file that stuff and make it work. That's a different topic. But you do need a box to put the paper in that you're going to keep, so that you know where it is and it's not buried under other stuff. The 4th box is for office supplies, and so this is the stapler and the ruler and the post-it notes and the paper clips. This is where you want to separate things that you use in the office from paper that you are working on, filing, saving. People tend to mix those things up into a jumble, and so we want to separate the supplies as actual supplies from the paper that is actually your data. So office supply boxes for that. You're going to discover that you have 1 million supplies. I know you're going to find 400,000 pens in your office somewhere, and you're going to be shocked when you put them all in one place. And so this box is going to be ripe for processing and thinning down your office supplies and making a donation to some teacher somewhere with the excess that you have. And then the last box is equipment. So this is where we talk about, here's your computer, here's your printer, here's your scanner. And sometimes people have plug in the wall pencil sharpeners and a very heavy duty stapler, or they have a 3-hole punch that has an arm on it. And so I think of that as equipment instead of supplies, because it has a larger footprint and it has a specific purpose, and it's very 3D. So that's the distinction for me between office supplies and equipment. It's more heavy duty stuff. Hopefully there won't be 1 million of these things. Hopefully you don't have a lot of equipment in there, but the things that you're going to use all the time should be in there. If they're too big for a box, that's fine. You can make a pile of equipment in the corner. The idea is to just pull it all together so you know what's there. Okay, so now you've cleared off all of the surfaces and you've undone everything, and hopefully you can see the floor again. And so then the next step is to move the furniture around. A lot of people set up their offices and they don't think about where they like to sit, what view they like to have at the desk. Is it distracting to be facing the door, or is it helpful to be facing the door? Is it better for me to be looking at a wall with a picture on it, or a wall with a window, or is it better that I have that to my back so that I'm not looking away, or does it affect the lighting? This is where you get to decide how the layout of the furniture is in the house and whether it makes sense for what you're doing. You want to make sure that, for instance, the phone is within reach, or where you park your cell phone. If you have, that's a commentary. If you have a landline, where you park your cell phone needs to be in reach. Maybe where you park and plug it in needs to be easy to get to, because you know you're going to sit in the office and you're always going to be charging your phone there. So a permanent charging station that's easy to access would be a good thing to plan. Make sure that you can reach your active files, and make a distinction here between active files, which are ones that you're often or frequently putting paper in or frequently referencing and pulling things out of to look at. And those files are the ones that need to be in the desk drawers. We all have these, 1 or 2 desk drawers, and if you have an office desk that ever actually came from an office, you probably have 1, and if you're lucky, 2 little small cubes that are basically, 12 by 18 or not very much bigger, that are part of the desk to hold files. And so the most important files, not important in terms of what you're keeping, but important in terms of what you're accessing, how often you're accessing them. Those are the files that need to be in the desk so that you can be reaching in and out of them without having to get up and move around. Then secondary files can be, if you have a little file cabinet that can be right next to your desk, maybe you have a lateral file that is behind some kind of credenza, maybe you just have a rolling cart that has a file drawer in it. But all of those options should be close enough for you to reach from the chair if you can make that work. Then the file cabinets, where you keep things and you go and put paper in that you are not getting out very often, the repository of all the paper data that is your life. Those file cabinets can be not near the desk. They can be across the room. They can be in another room, wherever you want them to be. Knowing that you're going to have to go and put things in them occasionally, but you don't have to get up to go get active stuff out of them. What else? Reference materials. So everybody has some reference materials that they use, and you probably want those in a bookcase, and they can be across the room as well, because you don't get into reference materials all the time. And then the excess office supplies, you need a parking space that is your office supply store in your office. And so finding a shelf, creating a container, using, if there's any kind of cabinets in your office, putting those supplies away in a cabinet is a way to get the excess supplies, not laying around on the floor, not on top of your desk. Put them away so that when you actually run out of staples from the one little box you have in your desk, you can get up and go to the supply closet and get the next box of staples. I know that we love our office supplies, but they don't need to be all up in your active work zone all the time. Excuse me. Once you've moved the furniture around and you've made it all a way that you want it to be, then you can redress the desk with the things that you use almost every day. And the rest can go into drawers or on shelves or into cabinets in the room. So only a few supplies on the desk, and the rest can be put away in the supply cabinet. So you should use this as a guide. If you do need it every day, are you asking yourself, do I need this every day? Do I pick it up every day? If it's yes, then put it on top of the desk so that you can just reach over and grab it, because you're going to do that every day. If it's not used every day, maybe use it once a week, and so you can put a few of those supplies somewhere in the desk. But if you don't need it, duplicates obviously go in the supply cabinet, but even if it's a supply that you only have one of it, if you're not going to use it but once a month or once a quarter, go put it in the supply cabinet. It doesn't have to live on your desk. The idea being that you have more work surface, the less stuff is crowded on the top of the desk. The same rule with the equipment. sure, you have an electric sharpener, and if you're old school, you probably have an adding machine. You might have a music source that isn't your computer. Maybe you have some kind of boom box or something, a radio that you're listening to. Those things don't have to be sitting on top of your desk taking up floor space. Desktop space, workspace. You can also move those things and put them in another part of the room. So maybe you plug in the pencil sharpener and stand up and go walk over once in a while. It'll get your blood circulating. It'll make your knees work, and you can go get up and walk over to the pencil sharpener. I'm talking about things that maybe not everybody uses, but if you have things that you like, just remember that they don't all have to live on top of the desk.
Well, and especially with the equipment, I think it's important to periodically evaluate what to keep, because our work styles have been evolving really dramatically even before the most recent crisis. Since the internet came along, work styles have been changing. And so I made the decision a couple of years ago that I don't need a printer at home, because I print so little that it's more practical for me to just go to the apartment complex office where they have a printer and that I can use,
And print.
than to take up a pretty big piece of counter space with a printer.
Well, and I use a printer more than that, because I am printing out some business records, and also
Right.
Kitty and I print out bead patterns all the time. So we print from home because of that. But it's something that the printer is not on my desk. It's on a credenza across the room. And then I get up and walk over to the printer. And so, evaluating whether the equipment is still important in your life. I'm sure there was a time when we all had fax machines, and that was super important. And nowadays, you really don't have to make room for a fax machine. It's not really an important piece of equipment anymore. And so you likely have equipment that migrated into your office at some point. It's been living there for a long time, and now it needs to migrate out. It's moved along. We've lived long enough to watch the evolution of working electronically, working digitally, and it's changed the landscape a lot. And so we probably have a lot of leftover eras hanging around in our offices, if you're our age anyway. Anybody that's younger may not have as much stuff, but it's something to evaluate. The last thing is, you can add some decor into your office if you want, but you want the space to be clear so that you can work, and so don't lose your mind decorating. You might think about decorating another area of your office and not actually a whole bunch on your desktop. And then we're talking about offices at home and not offices in a cubicle environment. Most businesses have rules about decorating your own space to personalize it. That bothers them a lot. So you probably don't have much stretching ability to do that at the office. But if you're at home, certainly you can personalize it to make it more pleasant for yourself. Just don't go overboard. This is not your bedroom. This is not the living room. This is a workspace. And so you want the space to be clear for working. And you also want it to be comfortable and not distracting. And so a lot of action in the background or on the surface is part of being distracting to you. And so we want to make sure you try to keep it clean for yourself. So that's the step process of clearing out the office. And it's a very fast process in written form. And of course, it's not that fast in the execution. So
it's a whole lot of work.
It's a lot of work, right? And offices are dense because of the paper that are in them. If you are an old school paper hound, you probably have a whole lot of paper in the office that you have to manage. So this is certainly something that you can do in steps, that you don't have to do all at once. And just remember that, like all organizing projects, it gets worse before it gets better. As you start to deconstruct, you create chaos, and it's going to be chaos while you're working on it. So just know that, and there will be light at the end of the tunnel. Don't get discouraged, because as you start the process, it gets worse before and you think you're not accomplishing anything, and you really are. You're just, shuffling all of the tiles around on the deck until you get down to where you want to go.
Gayle,
Okay.
Diane, who's with us in Zoom,
Hi,
says
Diane.
she's in a bedroom that's no longer in use as a bedroom. So she set up her desk there. But the room also still has a lot of other stuff. And so any special pointers on that office that's carved out of some other space?
Right. So this gives you sort of a secondary sorting project here, because you are now declaring that the original purpose of the room is now become shared with, it's going to be an office too. So you've agreed in your mind that you're surrendering part of the floor space and storage space to office. And so it means that the other purpose of the room, the contents of the other purpose of the room, has lost space. And so that means it's time to evaluate that stuff to find out how much of it needs to stay. So it needs to shrink in population. And so there's some things in there that probably need to go out. Now, you may decide that they need to go and live somewhere else, or you may just use this as an opportunity to go, okay, I've been parking these things in this guest room or this craft room or whatever I've been using it for, and I have had all of this space to fill out and stretch into, and now I need to shrink that footprint back. And so part of shrinking that back is shrinking the contents. It may just be a prompt for you to refresh those contents and find out how much of it really still needs to live with you and how much of it is ready to go on to the next person. It might be time. And rooms that are not, here's the kitchen has a purpose, the den with the TV has a purpose, the master bedroom has a purpose, and then other rooms, their purposes are more fluid and flexible, and they go back and forth and they change around. And so this room is probably a secondary use room, and it got designated at some point in your life the whatever room, and now you've just changed the designation, so you get to change the contents too.
Any particular pointers for somebody who's just got that, tiny little space, like if the only thing you can spare is that cubby hole they put in some kitchens,
right?
Or in our case, in our apartment, there's they just carved out a niche in the hallway, the entry hall.
Oh yeah, a little sliver.
Yeah.
So obviously, if you only have a little sliver to work with to park yourself, then you're looking at the main priorities are, can you put your computer, your chair, and comfortably get yourself, like then the priority becomes the most important equipment, which is what are you sitting on and what are you using in that space, and it's going to be some kind of computer, iPad, or whatever you work with. And then a little bitty box, a little bitty container of what supplies you absolutely have to have while you're in the middle of working. And so a very, very tiny collection, and have that collection be portable, because which means, put it in a box you can snap the lid on and carry away if you need to. So if you have to clear that space off and do something else with it, it's easy. This means that you're separating the actual work zone. If you're working in a sliver, then you're separating the actual work zone from here's where all the supplies are, here's where the rest of the equipment is, maybe the printer is going to be in another room, maybe all your excess office supplies are going to be in a cabinet in another room. So you're sort of splitting your function of your office instead of all being together. The sliver is where you're sitting and working, and everything else is going to have to be somewhere else. So you're going to have to find a corner in the house that is separate from your sliver to park the extra equipment and to park your supplies and park your resource material and that kind of stuff.
Whenever you're not using it.
Yeah, and then I would also add a small portable file box, because it's likely that you need papers and you might need some files, but like the little tiny 12 by 12 desk drawer that comes in some desks, you need one little bitty file box that you can work out of, so that you don't just cover your very small workspace with paper. And so giving yourself a little file box that you can file paper in. And maybe you'll have to like file paper temporarily and take the file box and go to a file cabinet and then put things away when you're through working. Or here's the active files for the projects you're working on, and everything else needs to go and get filed in another space. You just don't want to have to give up what small work surface you have to paper floating around everywhere. And so either one of those standing racks that you can slot paper into, or a little file box that you can close the lid and carry it off with a handle somewhere else, would allow you to work with paper while you're working and not lose track of it and not have it be stacked up in a big pile on your desk. Just something to allow you to manage the paper, I think, would be really helpful.
Yeah. Petra says, one of my colleagues has an IKEA desktop organizer that holds her laptop, notebook, pens, scissors, etc. For her, the purpose is that she can store everything away in a locker in one go. I think it would work well in small spaces as well.
Yeah. So it's a container that closes like a suitcase. Is that what's happening?
I'm not sure.
That's interesting. I'll have to go look that up and see if I can
Yeah.
find that product. But that's a great idea. The idea being that, you can put it away in a hurry and it's portable is a great function. Usually if you're working in that little sliver, it's because it's super temporary, right?
Yeah, a sort of office in a box.
Yeah.
Actually she said, no, it's open like a mail sorter, vertical slots.
Oh, gotcha. So then you're just picking it up and moving it. That's cool.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That works. I mean, if you are trapped in that kind of a space, then clearly you can't be moving a bunch of supplies around with you everywhere, but you occasionally have to pick up and go sit somewhere else. And so if it could be portable, that would be super helpful. And then you can put it away too, like the idea that yours is in the entry hall. That means that anybody that comes in the house is walking past your open desk with a bunch of stuff on it, right? And so being able to close that up so that you're sort of maintaining your privacy and it's not as cluttered looking when people walk by it is it speaks to having a container to put it in the short term. Just don't leave it there forever.
Right.
You're gonna have to go clean that container out someday, right?
Before we run out of time, I want to remind our viewers and listeners that our YouTube channel has more than 100 videos on a wide variety of organizing topics, including probably about 10 about paper.
Right, exactly, the paper sorting process.
Visit cfhou.com/YouTube and click subscribe on YouTube to get notifications whenever we post something new. We are just about out of time. I'll remind everybody watching live that we'll meet same time next week. That is Tuesday, May 5th at noon Central Time, US Central Time, live in Zoom and streaming on Facebook. And as I mentioned at the start, our topic is going to be the garage.
The garage. It's an ugly project, but better to do it now while it's cool.
And I know that not everybody who watches us regularly has garages. That's a somewhat U.S. centric topic, but we'll also talk about.
But you have sheds, or
other
you have
catch-all spaces,
basements, or you have finished attics. Everybody has that final domain space where things go to die on the way out of the house, and they're usually not climate controlled as well.
Right. We'll try and make it as relevant to as large an audience as we can.
Right.
If you're watching this on YouTube, we'd love for you to join us live. To get notifications about upcoming events, we invite you to join the meetup group by visiting cfhou.com/meetup.
There we go.
You can also follow us on Facebook by going to cfhou.com/Facebook, or subscribe to our mailing list by visiting cfhou.com/subscribe. We love to hear from you. We get great topic suggestions and questions every week, and it helps us keep coming up with new ideas. Please send us your questions and topic suggestions in the YouTube comments or on any of our channels, and you can always reach us through our website at clutterfairyhouston.com.
Thanks, you guys, for joining us. We appreciate seeing you again. We hope everybody is healthy and well out in the out in the world, and we appreciate you stopping by to chat us up, and we will talk to you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.